What is going on, everybody? So, when organizations look at the future, they most often use forecasting techniques. But in this video, I'll tell you why forecasting is not sufficient and why organizations need foresight above and beyond forecasting to look at the futures of their business environment. And make sure to stick until the end of the video where I will discuss a case study from the failure of Nokia to tell you why this is the case. Okay, so let's start where I've left you in the last video. In the last video, I've told you that the difference between forecasting and foresight is that in forecasting, we look at the future with quantitative techniques such as statistics in the short term, and that is between now and 5 years into the future. Whereas in foresight, we use qualitative techniques such as scenario planning to look at the medium and long-term future, and that is between 5 years up until 50 years ahead into the future. And by the way, if you haven't watched that video, make sure to check it out. Now, from this distinction, it should be clear that any company that wants to be present and still relevant 5 years from now and above should be doing foresight, right? Well, let's be the devil advocate of myself here. Why is that the case? Why do we have to use foresight in the long-term future? Why can't we just use forecasting? Well, the answer to that is very simple. If we use forecasting to look at the medium and especially at the long-term future, the error compounds. The assumptions we have about the continuation of a trend in the long-term future are very likely going to be incorrect. For example, take a look at this graph from a great book on scenario planning by Paul de Ruyter. In this graph, you can see that the assumptions we have about the continuation of a trend in the future can actually lead to very different results. The trend can eventually become an exponential curve, it can become a sinusoidal curve, or it can simply stay a linear curve. In fact, if we take a look at this other graph from the same book, that by the way, I'm going to paste in the description box down below, you can see that the oil prices forecasts by the Dow Jones and Company that this graph is showing are actually very different from how the prices really go in the future. Most of them are actually completely off mark. So the problem here is that when we forecast the continuation of a trend in the long-term future, we use past data. We do not take into account the behavior of other data in the future. Take, for example, the case of movie tickets forecasts. If you had forecasted the average growth of movie tickets sale in 2017 up until 2025, you would have missed the mark egregiously due to the pandemic, which is future data compared to the 2017 forecast that the 2017 forecast didn't take into account. But let's look at another example to make the case even further. In the late 90s, the mobile phone company Nokia made a lot of trend analysis, which is a form of forecasts. And according to their trend analysis, they found out that the most likely future was that GPS functions and MP3 functions were increasingly embedded into mobile phones. And that most likely future is simply a combination of several forecasts. If you take several forecasts together and you make a narrative, you simply have the most likely future, what we call the baseline future. Now, as a consequence of that baseline future forecast, they created a new series of phone, the N series, and a new mobile phone operating system, the Symbian operating system. And these phones with the Symbian system had built-in by default MP3 and GPS functions within the phones. So they basically put all their eggs in this baseline future basket. They bet all their interests into this baseline future that they had forecasted. They put all their resources into this baseline future. Now, the problem with that is that in the long-term future, and that is about 10 years after their forecasts, the future that eventually occurred was another future. Some new and very strong players forayed into the mobile phone market, such as Apple with the iPhone and Samsung with a new series of phones. And they created a much nimbler solution to have a lot of functions embedded into mobile phones, including but not limited to MP3 and GPS functions, in a manner that would be constantly updatable. And that nimbler solution is the app market. So what happened? Well, what happened is that Nokia's strategy failed miserably. Between 2008 and 2010, Nokia's mobile phone market share fell from 52% to 32%. It was a dramatic failure. Now, this happened because they put all their resources into their forecast, into their baseline scenario. They were literally blinded by their baseline scenario. You can do forecasts of the business environment of your organization. You're probably going to be right in the short-term future, but in the long run, you're probably going to be very wrong. This situation would have been avoided if Nokia used some foresight, if Nokia did some scenario planning. They should have spread their eggs in different baskets. In other words, they should have spread their resources across the different scenarios, not just the one they had forecasted as a baseline scenario. What I'm saying here is not that forecasts are useless. In fact, forecasts are very important. That's where we start. We start from forecasts, we create a baseline scenario, and then we create other scenarios. What I'm saying is that forecasts are not sufficient. What we need above and beyond forecasting is foresight. So I really hope that you liked this video and that it gave you a glimpse of why you should use foresight above and beyond forecasting when you look at the future of your business. If this video delivered any value to you, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also click the bell button so that you will be notified when I post my next video. And I will see you there. Ciao!